911, what is your emergency?
And a shooting at Thurston High School.
Okay.
Kip turned around and was like, okay, you need to get out of here.
I had no other choice. I couldn't.
You were feeling really guilty.
Yeah.
Hey there, glad to see you back here. Have you ever felt compared to someone else when you were growing up? Perhaps you had a sibling who was doing better at school or sports, or perhaps you felt like you simply weren't meeting your family's expectations at a certain point. It's hard to be a perfect child. Well, no one is. But sometimes teenagers can start to feel huge amounts of resentment towards their parents as they see their disappointment. In happy scenarios, families learn how to support their children through their learning process, and the children learn to be grateful for it. However, there are unhappy scenarios too. Sometimes kids never truly feel loved or appreciated. Instead, they give in to anger, and this turns to hate. And when it gets to this point, anything can happen. On May 20th, 1998, 15-year-old Kip Kinkle took the lives of his parents, classmates, and teachers in a shooting so horrifying that it left people in Oregon shattered to this day. Trigger warning, this case is about to get very upsetting and quite graphic. If you're ready though, let's dive in. This story begins in Eugene, Oregon, deep in the woods and close to the rivers. This is where the Kinkle family had built their beautiful home.
They built a house out there and they loved it out there because it's a very natural setting. It was quiet, there's animals, so they just loved the setting.
I mean, even the design of the house, it was kind of this A-frame, kind of like you'd see at a ski lodge or something like that. It was almost like going home every night to a recreation haven.
It seemed like the perfect spot to start a family, and for a time it was. Bill and Faith were Spanish school teachers who loved nature. They had a daughter, Kristen, and a son who was 6 years younger than Kristen, Kipland, or Kip. Kristen was a straight-A student, and her teachers and parents expected nothing less. But when Kip got to school age, he was diagnosed with a pretty bad case of dyslexia. His teachers even recommended he stayed home for a few more years. Bill and Faith listened to the advice, but Kip was devastated.
Because then all of a sudden, here are all his friends going on, and he's back.
In a family where everyone excelled at what they did, it was tough for Kip to constantly feel like a disappointment.
Kristen's gonna show us some headstands. Handstands. Look at that. Can you believe that? Kip's doing a handstand. I think that Kip needs some more work.
This might sound and look like a silly, innocent Sunday family video, but to Kip, these painful memories were piling up. Why couldn't he be as good as his sister or his peers? Then came Kristen's time to leave home, and she went to college. Soon, the dynamics changed.
I saw myself a lot of times as a mediator between my parents and my brother. My parents were getting older. My parents were in their mid-50s. There's a huge generation gap in between there. You know, one little thing that he would do would be awful.
When Faith and Bill overreacted to Kip's behavior, Kristen would step in and remind them that he was just a kid and had no bad intentions. But with Kristen out at college, Bill and Kip's relationship deteriorated. They would even fight over every little thing. And at school, it wasn't any better. Kip started being bullied, so he asked his parents to let him join a karate class.
I think Kip was interested in some self-defense because he just wasn't real happy with some things that some kids would say to him, and he wanted to be able to have the confidence of being able to protect himself if he needed to.
Soon enough, Kip started hanging out with some of the most troublesome kids at the school, the skaters and the smokers, most of which were in and out of juvie. When he was in 8th grade, Kip and his friends were caught stealing CDs from a local mall. Upset and at a loss, Bill and Faith decided to distract their son with a computer. They figured he loved games, so he would spend more time online and less time getting in trouble. But now, he could do whatever he wanted on that computer.
You know, a lot of parents don't check on their kids when they're in their room, because they're in the room, they're safe.
Kip spent most of his time in his room watching adult films and listening to songs with very violent lyrics. He was also researching ways to make bombs. Once, Kip and his friends downloaded a creepy recipe for making homemade bombs and sent it to the school computer to print it there. But they were caught, so Kip told the principal and his mom that he was interested in becoming a policeman. In fact, Kip had an interest in guns and violence from a very young age, and his parents were deeply concerned about it. They were a peaceful family who never owned a gun and didn't want their children to become aggressive.
And he was not allowed to have little soldiers. He was not allowed to have any kind of toy that had any kind of violent anything.
However, by the time he was a young teenager, Kip had convinced his parents to get him a BB gun and a knife. This is what he had amassed by 1998. When he was 11, Kip asked Bill to get him a real gun. Afraid that if he didn't, it would be some sort of forbidden fruit that Kip would want even more, he bought him a rifle for his 12th birthday. When Kip was arrested after throwing rocks at cars, Faith decided to take him to a psychologist. The first report said Kip shed some tears when talking about his father. He said his mother saw him as a good kid with bad habits, while his dad saw him as a bad kid with bad habits. He also said that he made explosives with gasoline to vent his anger. He felt bored, tired, and had no appetite. Kip was diagnosed with major depression symptoms and was even prescribed Prozac. He also advised Bill to ease up on Kip, and he tried. They even started discussing guns. Desperate to have a better relationship with his son, Bill bought Kip a semi-automatic gun and took him to a safety class. He also set a rule. Kip could only use this gun at home with him. 3 months into his treatment, Kip seemed so much better. He quit taking Prozac, and his psychologist agreed that they could take a break from the therapy sessions. The summer of 1997 seemed to be a very good one for the Kinkle family. Then, Kip started high school at Thurston High, the same school Bill had taught at for decades until his retirement. Within days, Bill called a friend.
I can remember Bill saying, "Stoney, I need some help with my son. I'm a little concerned about him getting a good start at Thurston High School."
Don Stone got him into the school's football team, not for performance, but in order to keep Kip making friends and feeling included. But instead of finding friends, Kip felt even more isolated, a scrawny guy in a group of sporty boys. He would write in his diary that he is always alone, and he hates himself for what he became. In one of his school reports, he wrote, "Love is a horrible thing. It makes things kill and hate." Kip had dated a girl for a few months, but it had recently ended. This only added more angst to Kip's dark feelings about his parents and school. While he was writing about hatred and people dying, Kip was also watching the news. More and more often, TV reports would mention mass school shootings. Soon enough, Kip started telling his friends about how he wanted to commit a school shooting as well.
But if he was going to go out, he'd try to take as many people out with him. And then also, if he was going to shoot people, like at a school, that he'd kill himself. And like, he couldn't believe that the other kids didn't just shoot themselves instead of sitting there. And
at home, Bill and Faith looked more and more tired. They didn't want to speak about Kip with their friends anymore, and it seemed like they had just lost all hope of having a good relationship with their son. On the morning of May 20th, 1998, Kip brought a weapon to school. But the police were tipped off, and he had spent $110 on it that morning. Detective Al Warthen came to school and asked to talk to Kip.
And I noticed that Kip was extremely nervous.
Kip admitted to the officer that he had a loaded weapon in his locker. The detective arrested Kip and took him to the station. He was charged with taking a firearm to a public location and buying a stolen gun. But he was released to Bill later that day.
And he got up, he put his hand on Kip's shoulder, and the two of them walked out and left the police department.
This was a big moment for Kip. The school expelled him, and his parents took his guns away. There would be no more tolerance for his violent behavior from now on.
Bill laid the law down to him and said, "Okay, that's it. You know, this is going to end right here, one way or the other. He's either going to straighten up or he's going to ship out."
This was very clear to Kip too, so that night he made a decision. On the evening of May 20th, Kip climbed down the stairs to the kitchen where his dad was sitting. He was armed with a .22 caliber rifle. He aimed it at the back of Bill's head and fired. Faith was still out in town for the day, unaware that her son had been expelled, arrested, or that he had killed her husband. When Faith got home, Kip greeted her with a weapon. He told her he loved her and fired several shots into her face and heart. There was no coming back for this. Kip listened to the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack on repeat the whole night. When the sun came up, he loaded himself with weapons and ammo and headed to the school, driving his parents' car. He walked down the school hallways until he bumped into his friend.
I didn't know it was Kip until Kip turned around and was like, okay, you need to get out of here.
When his friend wasn't sure what he was talking about, Kip pulled out his gun and started shooting at everyone else. Inside the cafeteria, Kip fired 48 shots in under a minute. He hit 24 students.
911, what is your emergency? And a shooting at Thurston High School.
Okay. Hear kids screaming.
Some of them are critical.
And I might heard some pop, 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 pop.
Involving a gunman and a rifle.
This mom is yelling, he's got a gun, get out of here.
There's been a shooting. Kids are running
I could smell blood. Oh my God. Saw blood spurting out of legs.
When Kip was out of ammo, a group of students beat him into submission and pinned him to the floor. He shouted at them to just kill him. When a police officer arrested him, Kip attacked him with a knife. That's when they realized Kip had killed his parents too. When they got to their home, loud opera music was playing. Finally, they found the bodies of Bill and Faith covered with sheets. At the police station, Kip broke down.
I had no other choice. I couldn't.
You were feeling really guilty.
Yeah.
He said he had to kill his mom because he couldn't tell her about killing Bill. He said once he killed his dad, he had no other choice but to kill his mom and everyone at school too. Then he just kept saying he wanted to die. Kip pled guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and 26 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 111 years in prison with no possibility of parole. It's truly sad when there is no redemption or closure for the victims. Kip will never be able to forgive himself or live with himself, and the many people he hurt will forever struggle to move past the horrific massacre in 1998. Hey, thanks for watching. As always, like and subscribe before you go. Till next time.